Wellness Artist Solo Exhibition. And just to give you some background on this wellness residency, we invite artists to Roxy Arts every academic year for the entirety of the academic year. The artist teaches a course in the fall school light. In the fall semester, they teach a studio art course, and in the spring, they mount a solo show in our gallery space. So we're very fortunate to have with us this year Shisa Saldamando as our artist in residence and as our first solo show in this space for the residency. These are portraits of neighbors, collaborators, fellow artists, and to see them represented with the beauty and intimacy that Shizu brings to the work is profoundly meaningful for all of us. When Shizu and I discussed the programming for this season, it was really important to me that the artists that were invited were really collaborators and had strong connections with Shizu. And to also use the platform to bring voices that are important for us to hear from in the contemporary art world today. So Shizu recommended these artists, and together we planned this season. So getting to tonight's talk, we're so grateful to have E.J. Hill and Texas Isaiah in this moment where they are ready to discuss and process their collaboration on Excellentia, Mollitia, Victoria, which was the piece that was exhibited in the Hammer Biennial in 2018. This was an extremely meaningful piece for everyone who experienced it. Certainly for me, it was not only a beautiful installation, stunningly beautiful installation, but also it spoke so deeply about the trauma and violence that certain young people experience every day in schools and institutions across this country. So I'm very happy to have experienced it. Thank you, EJ, and Texas Isaiah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us here. We are a little nervous. This is our first time speaking about this collaboration. It's been 2 years. And I think it's our 4th time seeing each other as well, because EJ had left immediately after his ceremony. So, yes. Thank you all for being here. Where do you want to begin?
I thought it could be cool to just talk a little bit about how we met, the first few minutes of saying hi and knowing that you were another person on planet Earth, which was in New York in 2016? 15. Yeah. I just moved there. I'm from LA, I'm from here, but I just moved to New York for a residency at the Studio Museum at the end of summer 2015, and you had a birthday party in a house in Harlem that I would eventually move into. But it was just some random house that I didn't know anyone who had lived there at the time. But it just so happened that I met a lot of the friends that I've come to know over the years, a lot of art mutual friends, from just some quick hey, my friend Texas Isaiah is having a birthday party at this beautiful house in Harlem. Do you want to come? Me being like, all right, I don't know anyone here yet. And then here we are, 5 years later.
Yeah, and then moving along too, because Lauren was in that house. That's how, I feel like that's how we both were connected to that space. And I pretty much was going to Studio Museum almost every day when Eric Halsey, Eric Mack, Sadie you and Jordan. And that was the first time that I photographed you, which was interesting because it felt very distant. It seemed like it wasn't something that you were prepared to do at that moment.
Be photographed,
Or just like in that, I feel like everyone was like working on what they had to present for the show, for the final show. And you know, usually when people come in, they're like, okay, we need you to take headshots. It's not like the most pleasant thing to hear when you are working towards a goal, but also when you are sitting in front of the camera. I think that it does bring up a lot of anxiety. And I think that was, yes, the first time that I photographed you. And then we reconnected out here after I moved here. It wasn't official. It was visiting California for about 8 months. And then you want to talk about how you reached out to me?
Yeah, well, you know, we had a lot of our mutual friends in New York were just people that we hung out with, and I think my practice isn't always, you know, like collaborative in the sense of, you know, I think about someone like Rafa, for example, like a friend of ours too, who's so many tenets of his practice is to include a lot of different makers and thinkers in and around and outside of Los Angeles. And so I've always thought of you know, my practice as something that's maybe collaborative in the sense of a type of emotionality, maybe, just like a really deep feeler. And so anytime I'm putting out my feelers into the world and sensing that someone else is also feeling things rather intensely, that's like, yeah, it's kin. And so I think being in LA and then thinking about this project, I knew that like running around all of the schools that I attended here would, I mean, yeah, it would be a lot. It would be a lot of emotional work to revisit these places, or these like sites of, you know, hurt. I mean, school growing up as like a queer kid in the 90s wasn't exactly like, you know, rainbows and puppies and like hugs and like soft stuff. It was quite violent, and I remember telling this story just a few days ago, actually, of just like being punched in the throat so hard on the playground one day and being called faggot that I thought I was like, I literally thought I was gonna die. You know, like I couldn't breathe and it hurt so bad. And this was just like, you know, recess. You know. And so like having these experiences that are stored in my body, and it wasn't just a one-off, like these are things that like live in my head and heart. And so when I was thinking about revisiting all of these places, I knew that whoever I was going to reach out to would have to be someone who felt or who knew quite intimately in their own bones the severity of like living queerly. And so I reached out and said, hey, do you want to do this crazy thing with me?
Yeah, EJ had reached out a couple times, and that was at the end of 2017, and I was in Willits, California, which is 3 hours north of the Bay, and I was camping for a month and a half on a wheat farm. And when I got back in December, I went over to your house and we sat in your garage and you were like, hey, do you want to work on this project with me? It's for Made in LA. And to be very honest, I did not know what Made in LA was. And I said yes. I was like, this sounds beautiful. I've always wanted to work with EJ. And I was also in a creative rut. And I love to try new things. So I consented, and we went to Marie Fagan shortly after, I believe, in a new year in 2018, and the first run was January 30th, 2018.
I haven't seen a lot of these since we worked on them, so this is like it's a little overwhelming.
And
one of the like core ideas of photography, you know, is that like there's a moment or a time and then it gets sort of captured and preserved, and photographs sort of have, you know, we have different relationships to images as we age, as the photographs age, as the conditions around, you know, how we imagine being in the world change. So even though it's only been 2 years, we're talking like this is our, you know, like we've been at it for like 40 or something. But I think it is really, you know, it's, that was a different time in our lives.
Yes, and so we walked around the school first and discussed what the images could look like, and more so how the images could be taken during that time. I remember EJ had suggested like, oh, perhaps we can get a car and have you in the car and you can shoot photos of me as I'm running. And I said no. I was like, I don't want to be in a car. I need to run with you because it seemed impossible at that time for me personally because I'm not a runner. So I was thinking about how vast the landscapes could be. And I think this was the smallest, maybe this was the smallest in terms of in mileage, perhaps. But
And I was still up and puffing. Also not a runner.
yes, but yeah, also, you know, I think creating these images, it was pretty much just going along with the flow. I couldn't create a visual structure for how this could be because it was the first time that somebody had asked me to participate in a project and run with them. You know, I didn't imagine how it could come out, but this was our first run, and it was very exhausting, as you can see.
Were there any things from this first one that sort of act as or served as indications for the others, things that you were like, oh man, like I don't know what I'm getting into, or I'm super pumped about this? Was there anything from this first one?
I think I was afraid.
Cool.
I was afraid. You know, I was thinking about what kind of equipment can I get? You know, should I get this lens? And I did try out. I think the run after this, I think I had a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, which is just a horrible idea. If you have ever tried that lens, it's very, very heavy. And so I was thinking about like what technical offerings I can contribute to the project, but I think I was afraid, which is something that happens before every shoot. You know, it's like, well, will I live up to this? Will this be good? Will I learn from this? Like, what lessons are, you know, my mind was running and I go to please EJ's, you know, like, I was spiraling in that way. And then also being very like concerned for you because, you know, my personal history with schooling, I went to Catholic school in East New York, Brooklyn, high school for a little bit in Long Island, and then I went to college for a year and a half at Queensborough Community College. And I studied under Jules Allen, and I dropped out and went into the punk scene and started making music and toured. So I identify as self-taught. So when you propose this project to me, it was very emotional because I was feeling conflicted with schooling around that time about whether or not I should go and get an MFA, you know, because I thought that would add value. Like, so I was grappling with those questions during that time. You know, as well as I need to take care of my friend, you know, during this month.
And we would also, I think, like, tag me. I think we would also go on walks prior to the project. Like, I think we walked just for maybe like the first 2 months. And so we did these like studio visits that were basically just long walks, like getting to know each other on a more personal level, like learning about each other's like histories and hang-ups and anxieties, fears and dreams and everything. Because in order to like go, and it was almost like we spoke about it sometimes, almost like romantic partnerships. Like we were gonna like build something together and like get into a really deep space. So before we even went on these runs, it was kind of just like, well, like what are the things that you carry around with you all day, every day? So I think by the time we started running, it kind of felt like we were like running not for art, but like taking up space in public. Because you were running with all of your equipment. I'm getting photographed while running, so that like visual bubble that we created for ourselves was kind of like, a mini spectacle on the street, and it like commanded attention in a way that wasn't just your average runner down the block. It like looked like something was going on. And so like to call attention to one's body and to call attention and basically like carry a flag around with you where you go, is scary. Like you don't know what you welcome in those instances. You don't know what you're inviting in when you ask people to look at you. And some of us, live in bodies and exist in bodies that are, no matter what you do or where you are highly visible. I think these are all the things that, we're kind of working through in these walks even.
Question.
Tell me,
What lesson did your body teach you during these runs, pre and during? I don't want to get to post, that's later.
I guess pre-project, the lessons that my body taught me were that my body wasn't mine. It wasn't something that really owned by me. It was something that is to be consumed by others, manipulated by others, pushed aside, swept under, celebrated sometimes. It's not all bad, of course. But during the lessons, the impetus for a lot of this was to create new conditions around my body and how it operated and moved through space and kind of taking it back, going through these schools and learning these lessons about. So this is Loyola High School in Venice and Normandy, Jesuit all boys high school where I went for freshman year, and I think this was the one that I was like, oh shit, what are we doing? What am I getting into? This one was particularly hard because at this time not at this time, but the time that I was a student at Loyola was when I was beginning to formulate ideas around my queerness and my body and like my attraction / repulsion to men. And I was at an all-boys school dealing with all of this stuff. And I remember that not being like the best place to work out those feelings. And I left early actually, like halfway through my freshman year, for just basically like a mental break at 14, like having all of this like weighing on my shoulders. And so when we went there this day, before the runs, I was like shaking and.
Well, yeah, we're interviewing us.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that one was super hard. So I think the lessons that I learned during all of this was that these actions and reinserting oneself into spaces and like reclaiming your agency can be quite powerful, because anytime I saw someone with a sweatshirt with the school's name, or like a bumper sticker, I would feel like kind of anxious and angry, and would kind of like in my mind like give the middle finger to like all of my former classmates and teachers. But then after this run, I had developed a new relationship to this site and the school and the building, and it was more triumphant. And so I remember seeing a bumper sticker on the car just weeks after this run, and instead of the mental middle finger, I smiled, because now we had this as a memory of that site, and it was something that was about care and love and like restoration. So. I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
So, as a self-described visual narrative, or a visual narrator, narrator, what do you think about this idea that like someone mentioned this to me the other day and it kind of like rattled me a bit, but especially in a time where there are pushes for heightened visibility of those of us who have kind of been, ignored or seemingly invisible. What about the people within those groups who still don't want to be seen? And like really, like maybe even for safety reasons or other reasons, like wish to remain invisible. How do you navigate that?
Through practice?
And in life and
Yeah. I feel like aside from working with you, a lot of my work does depend on collaboration. So when there is a sitter in front of me, we discuss where the images will go. And sometimes, a person wants to have that experience, engage with it, but they don't want their images to be public, which is fine. And to me, that's kind of a soft spot to be in. Because I think the ultimate goal is for people to desire to have images of them, not whether or not it's for the public. And I think that's something that we lean on more so now because of the conversations that are coming up, but also concerning social media. Personally, I'm conflicted about visibility. There are also not a lot of photos of me online that have not been taken by me. And I have my personal choices. Some of that has to do with safety, but then also I feel like I'm boxing myself in. It's something that I'm navigating through every day, and I feel like a lot of people are. But I think it depends on the sitter, because they have their images and that's what counts at the end of the day. Whether or not they want the public to see is their choice. And I don't have any issues with that because I'm serving my purpose as a visual narrator. And I'm grounded within that, where if I'm taking an image of you, it's not just my image, it's your image. I just help facilitate it. That connection between the eye, the tool, and your body. And I don't feel uncomfortable when someone chooses to not show their image. I feel like if I did, then that would be a little selfish of me. I would ask, like, why do I have such a deep desire for this image of somebody else, of another body to be in public when they don't feel okay about it? And then we can talk about, how the images are being distributed. So not only are images being uploaded online, but what does it look like for the image to be on the wall? What does it look like for the image to sell? Personally, with the folks that I photograph, if the image is being considered for a show, I reach out and I ask for consent. Like, hey, contracts are being signed as well to make sure that we're on the same page. And if the image does sell, the sitter does get a percentage. Because what does it look like to take an image of somebody and 5 and 5 and it sells, and I don't know what that person had to go through to get to the location in which we had to do the shooting. It's some people can They only had $20 in their pocket, but they needed that money. And so, for me, that's kind of a way to funnel money back into the community. I know that there needs to be a lot more conversations about how that can look like and how effective it can be. And I want to speak about that more, but I'm trying to figure it out as time goes on because I don't want to contribute to that starvation.
There were so many points in our collaboration where we would like check in with each other, almost like excessively, like, that just, or I don't know if there's such thing as excessive checking in, but it feels like kind of really beautiful. But even in preparing for this, I remember there was like one, you like texted me and said something like, hey, is it okay if I show images that haven't been seen before? And I was like, yeah, I love that idea. And so, kind of like working independently again, and then we come back together. And I wanted to post one of these images to Instagram because I knew that like you had already had a conversation about like showing them, we had a conversation about showing them here, but then I checked in with you, being like, hey, is it cool if I post one of these to Instagram? You were like, yeah, these are like, we did this together, these are your images, or our images. And I was like, yeah, but they're kind of like you took them, but I was in them, I don't know. So there's this funny kind of we have so much care for each other that like any potential slight toward the other just seems like it would be kind of like it would make the whole thing crumble, the thing that we've been trying to build in terms of mutual care and respect. But also we're both cancer, so I think like that has a lot to do with it.
Indeed. And I think, working with you, because this was such a year, I was so exhausted. I was utterly exhausted and went into a multiple project post drop. Because I was for my own personal work, I was memorializing a Black trans individual who's no longer with us. So I was going through a lot of grief, the kind of grief that comes along with not knowing someone in this realm, but feeling them all the time. And so I think working with you, it felt like I was like a tilted cup under running water. I was I was releasing a lot, but I was also ingesting so much. And I believe that our relationship had, and this work rebuilt a lot of trauma that I had experienced with masculinity. I think you were the first man that I collaborated with and formed a kinship with that felt so powerful. And I was so shocked by it. And then also a little bit resistant. Like you're waiting for something bad to happen.
Yeah, shoot a job.
Yeah. And so this was such an emotional trial. When people would ask me how was it like working with EJ, I was it's the best platonic relationship that I've had in a very long time. It feels very healthy, and that feels weird.
Yeah.
When you're not used to the good things.
So, as Texas Isaiah mentioned, after the runs, or after running, like the runs, after nerves, I swear. After the running and after the hammer installation and performance, the next day after the show ended, I woke up and got on a plane and moved to Boston and was there for a year. And I think if I didn't have that eject button, like if I didn't have time to just kind of bounce and immediately put my head somewhere else, I don't know if I would have been okay last year. I don't think you do something like this and then spend months performing an action like that and then just like go back to business as usual, go back to your life. So I was grateful to have something to distract me, but then because I was away from Los Angeles, away from home, away from my friends and family, I wasn't able to, and building new relationships with new places and new people, I wasn't able to hold and honor what we had created in the ways that I knew that I could. And we had a conversation recently, like maybe just a month or two ago, where I was kind of like, hey, I know I've like left and I know I bounced, but like, we're good, right? Because there were so many times during these days, this day in particular, I think was like, what, like 90 something degrees. It was so hot.
It was 2 runs that day. That was Southern California Regional Occupational Center and West High School.
Yeah, we did a 2 for that day. And again, not in the best shape ever. And that one was really, really tough and really hard. And then we do this thing and then I leave. And so we're talking about like, you know, men having, like how do you care for yourself? How do you care for another man? How do you like open this space and leave room for vulnerability and honesty and build something really beautiful that's almost like antithetical to everything that we've like learned about how to be men. And then just like bounce, you know? Where do you go from there?
You know, I chose some of these images to show you how vast the landscape was, like how far EJ was running. And so for every location, you know, I wasn't running with him the whole time, but when cars would pass by and see me, I was like, running this way, I was running this way, in order to meet him at different points. And, you know, going back to what you said, like, I think, you know, again, this was, I couldn't have asked for a better person to work with. If anything, when you apologized that day at lunch, it was like, you don't need to apologize for anything, you know that. You know? Although I deeply appreciated it, but I didn't think of it that way. This was such a fulfilling time and very necessary for both of us for the same and different reasons.
Yeah, maybe long distance is necessary, right? Distance running or something. That was at 90 degree there. Yeah. After like, I think what, like maybe we did scrap animals. So there's like 1 lap around the campus for each year that I attended the school. So I did like, if I was at, you know, the first high school Loyola, I was there for like almost a full year, did a full lap around the campus, and then West High, I was there for the remaining 3 years of high school, so it's 3 laps around that campus, which took up like almost like 4.
Like a football field, because there was a football field attached to it.
And then the theater, and then the baseball field. So this wasn't just like light jogging like around the track at school. And we did 2 schools that day, and the other one was a community college. So like this was no easy feat. Trying to get that like New Balance sponsorship. Yeah. Stack these coins. I have a question. All right. So in terms of running, you know, it's transitory. It's your emotion. at any point during this project, were there moments where you felt like you were running toward, or running away, or running back to? What did these feel like for you in terms of witnessing and accompanying, given that we're both individuals with our own sort of tracks?
All three. I feel like I was running away, running towards things, running inside. Like it felt, this was our last run. After I had gotten back from Hawaii, I think so. I had just gotten off a flight, like 2 hours before. It feel good in the moment. Running doesn't feel good if you are not a runner. You know, like you feel like all your organs are like jumping in your body, and like you're like, oh my God, is something gonna like pop out of my body if I run? And we're running on concrete too, which is the best surface to run on because of your knees. And so it didn't feel good physically, but you know, it was one of those things where you're experiencing healing in a physical kind of format. You're like, the healing it's not supposed to feel good. It really doesn't feel good all the time. It actually hurts. It's painful. You're reopening wounds that you have avoided or that you didn't have, enough tools to manage, And so it just felt like, it didn't feel terrible, but it just felt like very disruptive. But there was no question about like, oh, why am I doing this? Or fuck it. Or like, I'm gonna drop the ball on this. It wasn't that. I think it felt like a flight when you started your ceremony. And so I don't call what EJ did as a performance. I think that belittles that labor. I call it a ceremony. If you have seen the work, he elevated. He went from wearing all black to all white and to gold. That's a spiritual elevation. That's an offering. I felt the flight of running because we were supposed to do UCLA, which is wild. And I'm not from LA, I'm from Brooklyn, so I think we were passing UCLA during the opening, and I was like, hey, so where is UCLA? How big is it? And we were like in a vehicle for like about 15 minutes, and he's like, boo, we're driving past UCLA. And I was like, oh, we're gonna be doing this. And I started going to the gym and I started running. I ran in between 2 to 3 miles, 3 to 4 times a day. And I started to enjoy running. Throughout your whole summer, I was just running. I was preparing. And it felt good at that point. It felt like, oh wow, like now I'm finally understanding this. My body is comprehending, what this healing can be made out of.
I couldn't tell you where I first learned this, but maybe it's like one of those urban legends that you hear. It kind of makes sense when you tell our friends, and then it just becomes something that you believe is truth. But so I'm gonna share it again. I heard somewhere at some point that it takes about 21 days on average to form or break a habit. And so I think after we kind of, have been, after we sort of were in the project for more than a month, it became just kind of life. This is just what we did. We ran together. One of us photographed, the other posed on sunsets. But action poses. But I wanna in this sort of commitment to body and spirit. I wanna ask. We haven't really planned these questions or shared them with each other ahead of time, so it's we're kind of shooting in here. I wanna, of course we can, hear if we need to, but we both are experimenting with sobriety from alcohol. This is something that we've talked about for a little bit, and not knowing that the other was even thinking about starting this journey, and have sort of found each other again after an absence from each other's lives, like in like a spirit of sobriety. So I wanted to ask if we can think about, again, keeping the track metaphor and lanes and lessons that your own body is teaching you, how does this particular lane feel in terms of growth and groundedness and living, loving?
Yeah, it's actually amazing that we're both in that space together. And I pretty much decided once I really at the top of the year, and I was with a friend who has been sober for 7 months. And I felt like I just needed to take a break from alcohol, not like a permanent break, but just like I need a break. My body needs a break. And it felt like something I needed to do in order to pursue the personal work that I'm doing right now. So I'm thinking about building work in a very different way. It's an initiation. Like I have to do these things, with my body, with my spirit, in order to create this body of work, in order to, receive. That's how it feels like. And this taught me that. It definitely, I was feeling so, during this time I was feeling so lost around, like, you just wake up some mornings, you're like, what am I doing with my life? All these like,
I know them well, those ones.
all of these like good things are happening from other people's perspectives, and you feel lost. You're like, well, is this the work that is being made? Am I really enjoying it? Am I like, what is the root of this? And I found that in order to silence those questions, dim them a little bit, I'm like, these are the things that I need to do for myself. And they look very different for everybody. I just want to say that. It doesn't always look like going to the gym or not drinking. Alcohol is also an offering. So some people, they throw back that rum, those spirits, that's fine. But those are the things that I picked up from working with you, from using my physical body. This is the first time I used my physical body in order to create like a work with you. Look at you.
Yeah, this day, when we got to this day, I think this was like a really special one too, because we knew that it was not over, but that we had done what we set out to do. We had given ourselves a task, and this was it. It was like sunset in the South Bay. Everyone else was like walking in this park, with dogs and geese, and it was like really idyllic in this facade. And that huge tree you saw from earlier was just like roots coming out of the ground right there. I said New Balance, but I meant Nike sponsorship.
Yes.
Am I going too fast?
No, not at all. There's a lot of focus. So, did this ceremony exceed your expectations? Whatever those were.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, people always ask me like, did you train for it? And I didn't. I just kind of went for it. But I mean, my expectations. I don't know what I was expecting. I just knew that like. All right, I'll be super real. A rarity, right? But grad school, UCLA was really difficult for me. I've been pretty vocal about this in like other artist talks and when I lecture at other schools and speak to students. It was really hard, and not for the reasons that I thought it was going to be difficult. I thought, graduate level education, like I don't know, lots of reading or like rigorous approaches to like thinking critically or whatever. But I was dealing with just a lot of personal, like when you stick that many people into like a pressure cooker environment and then like dangle ideas of success in front of everybody, like carrot dangles, like it just made me and my peers and colleagues and even some of the faculty just crazy. Like it wasn't a healthy environment for me. And so I thought about like, UCLA being like the final boss of the video game, like it was like the final, run that we were gonna do. And then I got the idea, well, instead of running, the 8 miles around campus, I was just gonna like stand in the Herron Gallery, which is, UCLA affiliated, as like the sort of like championship move, like if I was able to complete this 3 months of standing, then like, yeah, I could make myself, then my like master of fine arts would actually be like, masterful, like I did it. And so I was thinking about all these schools in that regard. And now, ironically, that I'm like on the other side of this and working with students currently in like the professor role, I'm realizing that those things, they don't really like go away. Naively, I thought that like, oh, well, I went through this, so now it has to be better. In the 7 years that I've been out of school, of course it's going to be better. And I'm learning that like a lot of the students that I work with are dealing with like the same exact things that I struggled with all my life in school. And so then I have to wonder and question, maybe it's not the professors, maybe it's not the students, maybe it's just like the environment itself and like how the thing was structured years and years and years ago that we're just kind of like regurgitating and replicating. Like I remember telling a student this week, and I feel so like just crazy. I like almost verbatim, word for word, something that a professor told me that like boiled my blood then, that I just kind of like offered to this student in a critique, and I was just like, what am I saying? Like I don't even believe that, what I just said, but like it was so pounded into my head that this is what like artists like do and say and think, and this is how you make. And so like I was taking my kind of conditioning and formation and I don't know, just like putting it on somebody else, and it felt gross. It just felt disgusting, and now I have to like contend with what it means to do this work after having done this, to do it in a way that I think is actually healing and redemptive. Because it shouldn't have to be so extreme.
Yeah, I mean, it also speaks to how we all perform capitalism. I don't think that we can individually get away from it all the time. We find ourselves participating in it through language, through how we treat each other. But I think the very important thing is being able to highlight when those things are occurring. Like, oh, why did I just say that? That doesn't feel good. That didn't feel good for me. I think that's a very important step.
How can we be so keyed in? Like, what are there strategies you think that we can employ to when we're like able to catch it before we're just like spewing it out?
That's an everyday, that's something that we have to learn as we go on. Because we're still living in that system.
Mm-hmm.
Until it's disrupted and we figure out how to build more effective and healthy foundations, we're unlearning. And relearning.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, so in case no one knows about this, so EJ was chosen for made in LA, and when he asked me to collaborate with him, he was very specific on that. He's like, I just don't want you to make photos, I want you to collaborate with me. And so with that, I, as a collaborator, was also a part of Made in LA when I was chosen. And the more that I think about it, the more in which I feel like you have disrupted the algorithm of bringing in someone who was not chosen to be a part of this grand exhibit and participated in that way. And I feel like we had to figure out the business side of what that can look like so it can be even for all of us. Which I think is a very important thing to talk about, and it's something that I feel like as artists talk about in public, about what that really looks like. And I know that there may have been some resistance only because that is not something that is normalized. So do you mind talking a little bit about that?
I don't mind. I know how much work it takes to make art, what you see when you go to someone's like show or you step into a gallery or a museum, you're seeing like the aftermath of like months, years even of like a type of labor, like all chips in kind of labor. Like artists give so much to their work. And so knowing this, when I'm asking for someone to hey, you wanna help me make art? It's not an easy ask. This isn't just can you help me for a few hours? This is life work, it's soul work. And so I don't treat it lightly. And so when, I'm at the point now where I'm out of school, the work is starting to do things in a certain way that I thought I was gonna have to wait my entire life to be able to experience, more so in terms of access and capital and all of these things that I thought were just really far away. And so having the opportunity to exhibit at the Henry Museum and Made in LA, and then understanding that in a lot of ways this is a really pointed career moment for some people, asking you to collaborate, there were decisions and conversations that we had, just how to make this viable, sustainable, and just pleasant, personally, financially, even just the wall text at the museum had to go through a few changes because I was it can't just be my name on the wall. That feels really insincere. It feels dishonest. And I think about music and film a lot in terms of how it takes so many hands to create a film, and so many different hands and minds to create a record or an album. And then everyone from the person who brought the sandwiches on the 15-minute credit at the end. And I think art could probably benefit from some of those practices, to just shout out your people, let people know whose work really went into making this thing. And so we had to work through a few sometimes tense pushbacks on how to credit and who was credited and who was paid and who was paid what and percentage of what. And so all of these things that I think almost get pushed to the side because artists do put so much into the making of the thing, that by the time we get to the sort of nuts and bolts, logistics, business side of things, I'm usually tapped out and don't want to do any of that. But I think that's when you start to slip on that is when you open yourself up to being taken advantage of and being further manipulated. And I never want anyone who I'm working with to feel I'm inviting them, into a burning building or a train that's just about to go off the rails. I really think this is about care, and I wanted you to feel cared for in this. the last day.
Last day. So I had visited EJ as much as possible during the ceremony. I was traveling a lot, and I would wear all white. That's my thing. And walk into a space and sit in front of him and clear the space out. I was just sitting in front of EJ for an hour or two or however long. And it felt important for me to do that. It wasn't premeditated at all. Because I thought about, what would I do when I visit my friend? I would just stand there and just look around, and it kind of manifested into a collaborative meditation. Because I knew that he was standing there, so I knew his body was experiencing a lot of different emotions. And I think I wasn't surprised that you had chosen to stand on a podium for 3 months. I think a lot of people were surprised, but I wasn't. I was like, I understand, I get it. But that's also part of my emotional intensity. And understanding the things that people have to do for themselves, especially in a space like that. So I was sitting in front of EJ, and I knew that a lot of different lived experiences would be in that room. People who would cherish the moment, people who would understand, people who would be disrespectful and cross boundaries. And so I wanted to go in there and just cut the energy and just to clear the space out. So that he felt as held and witnessed as much as possible.
This is so surreal. I haven't had any time to think about this. Like it pops up sometimes, but I left just hours after stepping off the podium for the last time and moved across the country, dove into work, and then when that ended, came back. I just moved back in August, to start teaching, and then just jumped right back into another thing. And this is I can't believe it's been 2 years since we started, and now I'm talking about oh yeah, it's this one day, just kind of decided I was gonna do this wild thing. I don't know if it part of me feels well, what do you do now? What? I guess you just maybe keep going. Is that it? That last day, this is the green room at the Hammer, that last day, before stepping onto the podium for the last time, I got to a rhythm in this action that felt like I didn't want it to end, it had become my life. We were well past the 21-day mark of creating a habit, and this was just the life that I was living, and I became comfortable in that. And so it was really scary to leave it. It was frightening to begin it, but once it was just what I was doing, I had to dive into my life has been changing, pretty severely. And then on that last day, to see all of our friends on that day. To see everybody, the whole room, all of our friends come in that last hour and just flood that gallery for the last few minutes of this was like one of the most beautiful things that I've ever experienced in my life. People from like different corners of my life, different parts of LA, descended in that tiny vault gallery for the last 10 minutes and just stood with me. I think sometimes, in order to know that everything is going to be okay, you have to go through some like really tough shit, you know? I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we didn't have to live lives that were so grating and grueling. But I've been able to meet some of the most amazing people and have the most incredible experience because things have been less than optimal. I cannot ever thank you enough for being willing to come on this journey with me and trust that we'd be able to take care of each other through something that's like seemingly impossible as this. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So proud doesn't seem suitable. Seeing the faces of your family, your mom stopping by, almost every night to drive you back home.
Yeah, I didn't have a car during this.
But just that kind of dedication and need and desire to follow through. Was remarkable. And I know, when we put work out into public spaces and these kind of performances, I know that the expectation is to always do this. So it also speaks to how people see our bodies as just continuous, like moving vehicles for them. Like, can you do this intense thing again?
Yeah.
For 3-4 months? Like, when is that gonna happen?
Yeah.
And then all the show, I didn't go to the one in New York, which was so beautiful. I wish it was there because you were showing photographs that you had taken on your one day off,
Right.
which was so profound.
Not a day off at all.
And then, the object that you had spent so much time building and, being a part of in this way. And how all these shows, even the one that, just closed maybe like a month ago or so, less, were so powerfully subtle. In which you're like, this is what you're getting.
That's all you get.
People
People coming to the painting show and asking, what time was their performance?
Yeah.
No, I think, of course some of us get asked to like show up in ways that others don't all the time, as you mentioned. But I think we just have to show up, for ourselves and the ones that we choose to show up for, because ultimately I think it is our choice. We do have to protect ourselves, protect our spirits, and I think it's arriving, being present in the ways that feel most generative to you, and that might feel different for what, your versions of that. Oh my God, y'all. Alright.
This is also why I chose this image. I don't like it. I don't like the composition of it, but they had all of it. It just says zero harm. Make safety personal.
Shout out West High School. My French teacher told me that biennial was a sin, and that she didn't agree with my lifestyle. Again, it's not all that, but you know, a lot of it is not so much. It's like you're teaching French, like shut up. You know? This is not in the syllabus.
If anyone has any questions,
Or about it.
I guess I wanted to ask about I guess positive, you went into the positive, I guess, the physical toll this took on both of your bodies, and how if that's shaped or informed your practice now, and if it has happened.
Actually, the physical therapist that I had, that I was working with at this time, like went in for like a lot of preventative care, like primary doctor, physical therapist, you know, like a psychotherapist. Like I was going like all in like care. I still see her because I have like residual like pain in my left leg from standing, and in my right shoulder. That she's like still working out 2 years later. That I'm not sure if. I mean, I don't know. I'm not getting any younger, so I don't know if it'll ever go away. It might just be like echoes of these pains, like on long days when I'm driving, like my left leg is just like on fire. And that might just be like what I deal with from here on out. But I think also I think about these like pains as almost like battle scars, you know. Like it hurts, but like I kind of, you know, wear it proudly. Like who else can say that, you know, they like survive something like that standing for 3 months. Like in public too, like people bring a lot of stuff with them that they just like unload and dump onto doing something like that. And so I think in terms of how's it affected my work, I haven't really performed since then, you know? And I'm not saying that I will never again. I've like done little like one-off, like, you know, like I'll like sing at a party or something, because like she's a natural born performer and needs to have people look at her. But yeah, there's something about this that feels like, you know, maybe I do want to kind of like orbit abstraction for a little bit and like get lost in like color and line and form. Not to say that feels like lower stakes by any means, no, but it's just not this, and I need something else that's not this, for sure.
I think a lot of times you create creativity, you know, you guys like a really good question or something, like a line of inquiry or something. I was curious, like, what kind of things did both of you figure out or discover in the process of making, like, this would probably work? No, anything like you like just did not expect at all? Or like, I mean, you touched a little bit about
I didn't think that this would be so meditative, the standing part. I thought that 100% of it was going to be really grueling. And there were some days where I'm not being funny about this at all. Like I would stand up there and be like high the whole time. For the whole like 9 hours, just like eyes in the back of my head, sort of like, you know, slightly like waving, like willow in some field, just like somewhere else the whole day. And the frustrating part was like wanting to go in the next day and be like, all right, like let's do it, like let's get high again, and then just feeling nothing but pain, you know, for the whole day. And so I think, you know, that was, I could have never anticipated that. I could have never expected that, like, depending on like any number of factors that day, that my body was either my current that would just feel like so soothing, and then other days just like be on fire physically. Like that was actually one of the hugest sort of like revelations during the standing part of this. The body's an incredible machine. Yeah, how about you? Anything that kind of surprised you throughout all of this?
A lot. I didn't know what I was walking into. Learning to move and capture. That was something that I had never done before. And I was learning as I was going. There's no way to, you know, I'm not a sports photographer. And I also didn't want to create as much physical distance between EJ and I if I did choose to embark in that kind of technicality. So I had to, I shot these photographs on 50. So I had to run and shoot and that was something that, yeah, that was extremely new for me. And then also I had to let go of a lot of expectations concerning aesthetics as well. You know, like not everything is going to be in focus. Not everything is going to be, you know, symmetrical. And so I took a lot of images. I think maybe over 2,000, maybe 3,000. I can't imagine what this would have been like if I shot the film. It's very expensive, yes, but you know, but I also shoot like I am, you know, like shooting film. I love film. So yeah, I think it was running and shooting. And you know, to be honest, you know, that year too, at the end of 2018, I had surgery, I had top surgery specifically, and so I was running with a binder on, and I was wearing one on and off for about like 5 years, and so my breathing was restricted, and my body, you know, was just always in pain, and so I was running, shooting, and like trying to breathe. Yeah.
What's an after lesson from your early question? And now, how do you feel?
I feel great.
There it is.
Yeah, I actually ran 2 months today.
Damn.
EJ made me a runner. EJ made me a runner. Like I just started a 6-week program, but a workout program, but I run almost every other day. And
I'm still not a runner.
And you know, I always think about it. I always think about you when I'm running. Always. And it always feels like I'm preparing for UCLA.
We're all preparing for it.
And I think that is such a beautiful thing. To perform an action, to think about somebody constantly. Like I'm running for your well-being, like I'm praying for you. It feels like a prayer, you know? That's what running has turned into, which is such a beautiful thing because I just never, like, I mean, I did track. Wasn't on the track team when I was younger, but you know, I ran around the block with the homies, but to actually have practice that I enjoy, like, you know, when you do something for the first time, especially in kind of form of exercise, it's like, whoa, I'm never coming back here again. you know, and now I'm just like, I go to the gym and I'm like, I'm gonna run. And I run in the morning, like a little bit before the sun comes up. Toni Morrison talks about that in her documentary. There's just something about waking up before the sun and working, you know. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is not a question, but I was thinking when you were talking about what it is to be running, and then I was thinking what it is to be standing for long periods, that I am not running, but I was running, but thinking about when you are running, sometimes you get into that stage where you don't think that you're running, and you just are doing it. And all this experience that we have now. And then when you are standing at that podium, you don't think anymore that you are standing. Some days it feels super hard, it feels like you can be there for long hours. And the next day, everything is pain, and it just feels like, oh my God, I cannot do this. So I was just thinking that two very different activities. We have sometimes the same, it could be the same activity, you know, you are running and you suddenly lost yourself and you don't know how much you run, and you run like 10 miles, and that is a long distance. And then you're standing and suddenly you're not there, you realize how come it takes 5 to 6 or 8 hours, and it's the same kind of losing yourself in this activity that's just very smooth. And other days are really difficult. And really good. You know, not even how long.
Yeah, I think that's, hearing you speak and like hearing it back was just kind of like, well, yeah, like, of course, right? Like when I was saying, I was like, oh my God, like so crazy, like, but now I'm just like, well, yeah, it's kind of just like every day waking up is like that, like going through life. Like some days are just like, I got this, and then, right? And then like the other ones, not so much. And so there's something like really familiar about that rhythm, but for some reason, it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to forget that like, yeah, sure, it's hard now, but like, it won't always be. And then when you're coasting, like, this is great, but like, just hold on, I don't know if it's like, hearing it reminder feels like, I don't know.
That is probably a really good thought for your students also. Thinking about that being when you're in school, you think about this kind of experiences, but
That's really good. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question?
I guess after doing something, both of you, that makes you so aware of your own body in public, how has it changed the way that you see other people in public? I know that's kind of a big question, or has it at all?
I think this was a different way to be aware in my body, I feel like I always am, because I'm Black, I'm queer, I'm trans, that's being in my body is something that I always think about. Being in public too is very complicated, depending on how people perceive me. But I've always, I think the consideration has grown for other people when I see people in public. More questions, less assumptions, more relief within my own body and then offering that to others.
That's, yeah, that's a tough one. I would like to think that I have, you know, so much more like empathy and regard for others. Like that would be like, you know, really beautiful to be able to like be like, yeah, you know what, I love everybody. But I think what has happened is that I've retreated, like in a really major way after this. So like my encounters with others are quite limited these days. Like I would have never described myself as like an introvert, but after this, I've pulled way, way back. I was on display so very publicly in a really, really intense way, and then I've gone like all the way in, which I think has been like pretty tough. Because I kind of like thrived in living socially. I loved meeting new people for a really long time, and now it just like totally freaks me out. And I'm not so sure how much of that is like a direct, reflection of like this experience, but of course it had to have contributed in some way. And so, like the idea of other people and our differences and like their respective journeys and everything, like the idea of that, like, yeah, I think there's room for all of us. But thinking about it like in practice, I don't know, that's a little harder. I spend a lot of time alone now. I don't know, maybe I don't know if that answers the question.
I think my work doesn't allow me to pull back a lot. Not in that way. I wish. But I feel like maybe I became more inclusive as well after this. I mean, it was a year. I had surgery and I was sick for 5 months, and then I think that kind of snowballed into me being alone. But I think what I was talking about in terms of consideration, it's like I still have to photograph people. That's my life's work. Do I get a break from that? Like, yes, but I don't know. I've always also been afraid of people and also been very drawn to people. It's always this thing, you know?
So, I don't know if this was your experience, but experiencing the process of it, felt that you were just representing yourself, but that you were representing Black, queer, trans, brown bodies universally. And my question is, did it feel that way to you or not? And if it did, was there an extra heaviness or an extra, responsibility or pressure, and what did that feel like or not feel that?
So a lot of the language that's ascribed to the standing part of this project at the Hammer, in the gallery, we devise like well in advance, for like catalog and like wall text and all that stuff. So we're like thinking about the language and how to describe it for a while. So in my head, I thought that yes, I was like doing this thing, like standing for Black bodies, queer bodies, any body who has ever felt like marginal, peripheral. And then what I realized in the gallery as I was standing was that so many different types of people that I just from like very, very little to like not so little, were responding in a way that, I did feel responsible after a while, because I started to envision myself almost like an antenna or some sort of like receiver, because people would come in and just like unload. Like people would come in and just like openly sob would just like, you know, sit in front of me or stand in front of me or just like repeat, like the repeat visitors were always the most interesting because they would like come like clockwork on certain days and just like be in the room for up to 30 minutes at a time with me. And so then after I started to see these patterns, I realized that I wasn't just like standing for me and my own, to like exercise my own traumas of like school and feeling outside or feeling othered, but that there were so many other people who like needed to see that I could finish this task, like needed to see that someone could do something that seemed out of the realm of possibilities. It felt like, people were like relying to like hold what they felt was too heavy for them. And I was up for the challenge, you know? And so I accepted.
Thank you for your openness about your collaboration. I've been collaborating with a friend and colleague for the last few years, and it's been very powerful, and I heard so much that resonated, and the openness that you offered to all of us here today is really incredible. I also really appreciate that you're both obviously teachers. And the comments that came up about, not explicitly about pedagogy per se, but just the idea of having these ideas that are in your head as someone who grew up in a time and place and has some of your experiences, and then when you try to teach others, whatever that context might be, to find yourself doing the very thing that you wish you weren't doing. And I guess I've been struggling with this. I've been teaching Occidental for 20 years, and I've been struggling with it. And I think I finally started to realize that if I have an embodied approach to my teaching, which I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm kind of grappling with what that means. I'm trying to think, like, what does it mean to be an embodied teacher? Is that a way to fend off those voices and those structures where you find yourself saying the very thing that you wish you could say? And your conversation tonight made me realize that that's what I've been trying to do, so I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Do you ever miss the experience of working on the project?
I have missed Texas Isaiah
Miss DJ.
and working alongside any of that. No. But yeah, I guess, I want to, before, taking off, just very, very special thank you to
Thank you so
Shizu
much.
for inviting us to San Francisco.